Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I have another interview for you today. I got this down with friend of the podcast, JD Oliva, who is on Superhero Speak, but this wasn't to talk podcasting, it was to talk about writing. JD is an author, he's actually been on the show before to talk about one of his books, and he's got, I believe this is his 11th or 12th book coming out, which is insane. That's so great. The guy's super prolific, which is awesome because he's also a very busy guy. He talks about it a little bit. But it's always inspiring for me to talk to these creative people because if you want to do it, you're going to find a way. There's no such thing as I don't have time, something else we talk about, so I guess I should shut about it here. Anyway, JD's newest book is called Red Sunrise. Takes place in feudal Japan where the days of the samurai were kind of at an end. It was more of the time of like the Ronin. He goes into the history of it a little bit more because he knows the history more. But you take that awesome, already interesting time period, already interesting place in history, and add vampires. Sounds like a no-brainer to me. Sounds really awesome. It's a novella that he's kickstarting right now, so you can check it out. The link is in the show notes. Enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with JD to talk about his newest book, Red Sunrise. How you doing, JD?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I know we talked a little bit ago about, was it your previous book, or have you had any in between now and then?
I've had quite a few actually. Kickstarter is a big part of my business model. I've been doing 2 Kickstarters a year. I'm trying to get up to quarterly. We just ran one in the spring. I got another one planned for around Halloween. So this is Kickstarter is a big part of my business model.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember in our last conversation you were very, very prolific.
I try to be, man. It's when you're an independent publisher, it's all about volume, how much you can get out, how much you can get done, how much stuff you can sell in a short amount of time because people's attention spans are really short. So you gotta keep them entertained, keep things moving.
That makes sense. For people who missed our first interview, do you want to kind of give a little bit of your background, kind of a
Sure.
catch up on how you got into it and everything?
Sure. My name is JD Oliva. I'm a co-host of Superhero Speak, which is a good friend podcast for So Wizard, and I'm a writer. I've been doing comics and film, and then about 5 years ago, I decided I'm going to write books. But I didn't know how to do that, so I basically took time to educate myself, and in that time, I've released 11 books. This will be number 12, and basically, I write supernatural thrillers, and I know it's kind of where my head's at. I like like thriller stories that have like this weird bend. It's like, okay, you've got like a hitman. What if he was going after lizard people? Stuff like that. That's kind of where my brain goes. So this is another one of this book right here is another case of that. This Red Sunrise. It's feudal Japan under the rule of a vampire clan, and a singular samurai is hired to take them down. So it's kind of the fun story we put together here.
I love that about the genre that you write in, and you see these things crop up every now and then where it's like you take two awesome things and put them together, and then the only question is like, how has no one else done this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if no one else has done like a samurai vampire thing, but this is an idea that I got in college because I was a history I majored in film, but I was a history minor, and I was taking a Japanese history course, and we were talking about the Tokugawa shogunate in feudal Japan, and I just sat there. That'd be really cool if it was a vampire, and it
Yeah.
was really the idea has been with me kind of ever since. And we did a Kickstarter for this as a comic way back in 2017. We funded the first issue successfully, and the artist and I kind of had a falling out. He wasn't making his deadlines, and so I just kind of put the story on the back burner while I kind of reinvented myself as an author. And I just felt like it was the right time. It was like, what, I've been wanting to finish the story for a long time. I'm better, quite frankly, as an author than I ever was as a comic writer. So I figured this is a good chance to just kind of get in there and finish a story I've been wanting to tell for like, geez, almost 20 years now.
Is the core story kind of like the same? Like maybe 20 years ago you had an idea, but since your comic, has the story really changed a ton, or you're kind of in the same vein?
It's pretty similar. There are changes that were made just because transferring it from a visual medium to, just a book medium. I had to do things differently. I also had a chance to kind of revisit my original notes and kind of like, oh, this doesn't work as well as I thought it did. This does work as good. This looks better. And it's not a different story, but I changed a couple things here and there. The ending is the same. The ending has been the ending since day one. So but there's a little detours in how we wind up getting there.
That's pretty cool. It's always fun when you've had an idea in your head for years and years and years to finally see it like coming out into the world.
I tend to do that. I tend to let things kind of fester in my brain for a long time before I actually write them. Like I get a lot of ideas, but I don't know if all of them are good. So I figure if something can stick with me for a while, I'll write it. Like I've got a long running series, and that's a little different. Then if I just get an idea for the character, I can just kind of go with that. But for these like standalone stories, I think it works better if it's something that has kind of stuck with me for a long time. This is the case with this one in particular.
Do you find as a writer when you get an idea, like say it's in the middle of the night, that that trope of like having a notepad next to the bed, or now I guess it would be your phone. Um, do you go into that, or are you more kind of like, if it's a good idea, I'll remember it?
I'm more the latter. I have written down stuff I've thought of. Like if I'll get an idea for something I already have an idea for, I'll throw notes to it. But if I just get like a raw high concept in my head, I'm not going to write anything down until I'm sure that I like it. Because again, yeah, I get a lot of ideas. Most of them suck, quite frankly. So you don't want to commit anything down until you know there's something to it. So I kind of I like to let things build a little bit before I commit to them because I've got a ton. If I had a notebook written of all the ideas I've had, the day would be full. So it's easier for me if I say, okay, if I like it, if there's something there, my brain will creep back to it eventually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because that whole thing with the notebook you were saying is like, at what point do you read a notebook cover to cover to find your ideas?
I can't even read my own handwriting anymore. I've tried to do the notebook thing, and I go back and look at it. I'm like, wow, my handwriting is completely devolved. I'm so phone reliant now.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing about myself too. Cannot handwrite at all. So when you do these stories, your ideas, and sorry, not the stories. When you have
Yep.
these ideas, do you have like maybe a collection of shorts or something? You're kind of working on the back burner for ideas that are like, that's a cool idea, but it's 8 pages, not 100 or whatever.
I tend to think in grander terms than a lot of people. I'm not great at short stories. This is a novella actually, which kind of surprised me when I sat to write it because it's originally a four issue is plotted in my brain as a four-issue comic book series. And when I sat down to write it, it was paced like a comic. So I mean, like the pacing of this, I just had a review of this book come in. Someone called it episodic, which I found interesting because the chapters are all like scenes, like in my brain, they were all scenes from a comic. So this book is only like 165 pages, so it's a novella. It's this is about as short as I typically get. I do have some short stories, but I go in with the idea of okay, this is going to be a short story. I write real tight outlines. Like before I commit to writing something fully, I want to know where it's going. Again, that's the background in comics and film. Like I need to kind of know A to B to C before I sit down and write it. So I have a good idea of how long the story is going to be before I ever really get into writing it. This is a case of like it wound up being a little bit shorter than I expected, but I felt like well, beefing it up is gonna add fat to the story, and it doesn't need that. We can keep it trim, and Kickstarter is a great place to put out a novella because a novella is if you release into the market on Amazon or you're trying to find a traditional publisher for it, they die a slow death. There's just not a big market for a novella. Whereas in Kickstarter, I can make a big deal. Like, hey, I got this book, da, 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 and make a big deal about it. And far more people are going to get their hands on it than if I ever would have tried to put it out. It's just regular novella. So, I don't really have like, okay, I'm gonna make this is gonna be this long, this is gonna be this long. I just, I kind of if I have the raw concept in my head, I kind of have an idea of where it's going, and if something works better for a short or a novella or like a regular novel size book.
That seems like it's probably one of the benefits of you being a completely indie author, which I'm sure has a lot of downsides. I'm sure it's very difficult at times. But the fact that you're not like, someone's not telling you, well, we need it to be 300 pages. And you're like, well, I can't double the story. It's just going to be filler.
Yeah, I mean that does it does help. I mean, most people in my situation are indie. The traditional publishing space is monopolized by guys like Stephen King and James Patterson. Like that's who they want to publish, which is fine. That's where they're making their money. People like me aren't going to get the attention from the big traditional publishing houses. There's only four of them now, so indie is the way to go because you have a direct route to the people. You have a direct route to talk to fans. Kickstarter in particular worked really well for me. I have friends that do great on Amazon, just specifically putting their books out there. So it's all about finding a way to reach people. And no one cares as much about your career as you do. So I'm going to work way harder than anybody else will to make sure that my books sell because I got to pay a mortgage. I got a kid I got to put through school. This is how I'm doing it. So who's gonna outwork me?
Right, exactly. That's a really good point, and also something good for people who are listening who are either just starting or maybe hit a roadblock in their own creative pursuit. Is I don't think that's unique to novels. It seems
No.
like novels, comics, I mean, even movies now. There's more indie movies than studio movies coming out lately. So it just seems like that's the wave of the future: is the self created, self promoted everything.
It is because it costs so much to do things, right? It costs so much to make a movie. It costs so much to do a comic series. Like, so if you can strip away kind of the middlemen and really kind of focus on what you want, and if you're understanding the idea that you don't, because there's used to be this big idea that you got to cast a wide net to track as many people as possible. When you're indie, you don't want to do that. You want to keep it narrow. You want to cast a small net, right? Because the idea is to find people that like your stuff. They're going to come back for your books, right? I don't want a million people looking at what I do because I'm not going to get that, right? I'm gonna fall away. I'm gonna slide into the ether. If I can get a few thousand people to like what I want, what I do, and want to come back for more, and get those people into what I'm doing, then that creates a customer base and a fan base for me, right? It's really not. It's a complete opposite approach to business. Which when you talk to some people who maybe came up back in the day, they think that's wrong, but it's working really well for independent creators like myself who want to tell their stories the way they want to do them. And that's not to say I don't have an editor or anything like that. I hire an editor who's really great, who beats up my stuff. And I have people who I trust that I take my work to that's making sure that it hits all the spots it needs to hit so that it can compete on the shelves with everything that's kind of being promoted with a lot of money behind it. And that's the thing with comics a little different because everyone's got like, I read DC, I read Marvel, I like Image, blah, blah. I never met a single person that says I only read novels from Penguin Random House, right? That person does not exist. So
Right.
as long as your cover looks like it hits the right tropes or looks like it could sit on the shelves, people are going to look at you in the same way they look at other writers. Maybe not Stephen King or James Patterson, but that's fine. Nobody can compete with those guys. But I mean, like anyone else, you put the book. If you put Red Sunrise on a shelf next to a bunch of other things that are in the same genre, same vein, it looks like it belongs because I've taken the time to make sure that it does.
That makes a lot of sense, and a lot of what you're saying. Not to keep bringing it back to our first conversation, because people might not have heard it and they wouldn't want me to just talk inside baseball. But it is all like triggering these things where like you've really sat down and made a game plan for your career as an author. You're not just like, oh, that's a cool idea. I'll write it. I'll throw it on Kindle and see what happens. Like you're really going for it.
There's a lot of people. They say there's millions. There's are literally millions of books released on Amazon. There's tons. So how do you wade through those waters? And a lot of it is just having a plan. A lot of people put books on there that don't have a plan, and that's fine. Like they just want to say, hey, I wrote a book and it's available, no problem. But if you if you want to make this a career, you need to have a business plan, and that's been the hardest part about this is trying to figure out the business end of it. And there's so many different. This is nice. It's like over the last few years, like more routes have developed for an independent author like myself to make it work. I have failed as trying to be a Kindle exclusive. My books just don't work on Kindle Unlimited. Like they're not what that particular reader is looking for. As on Kickstarter, where I can appeal to people who like movies, people who like comics, people who aren't necessarily just book readers. Those are the people who tend to like my stuff a little bit more. And it's again, it's all about finding out where your readers are because they're somewhere, right? There's if you're a good writer, there's people that want to read your stuff. It's all about finding them. That's the tricky part. That's the hard part, and I'm still the Kickstarter's been a good outlet for me, but it can't be the end all be all. I have to keep growing as a businessman and as a writer myself. So it's a constant challenge of okay, I've got to this point. How do I get to this point? Because I do pretty good, but I'm not doing good enough, financially speaking. So I still trying to unlock all those little steps.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that takes time, and it's hopefully something that's kind of like the snowball effect, where you pick up a little, you pick up a little, but then you're growing exponentially as you.
Trying. It's like I said, it's tough. And like, if you're a romance writer, I'm not saying it's easy, but I mean, there's a network of people that want to read that stuff and will read your stuff. If you're like me, you're a horror thriller writer. It's a smaller pool you're working with, so you gotta figure out how to stand out. You got to figure out what makes you different. You got to figure out kind of where you can hit people with what they want to read without giving them the same thing over and over again. Because there are people that will sit there and say, you need to write in this genre, you need to hit all these tropes, you need to make sure the book does this, this, and this. And then it's basically, well, I'm basically working at McDonald's. Then. I'm doing like burgers. Like I don't want to do that. And I know there's people make great money doing it. And that's totally cool. Like good for you. It just doesn't work for me. So I got to be a little bit out. I hate to use a cliche term like outside the box, but I have to be a little different to figure out how to find readers. That's coming on shows like So Wizard and talking about it.
For sure, yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about you don't need for your book to show up in front of 2 million people. You need to show up in front of a couple thousand of the right
The
people.
right that's the key is the right people is getting people like if I just put my book out there on Amazon, just let it exist, it gets lost, right? It will drown. So I have to find the right people to read it. And Amazon's a search engine more than anything else. Like it's trying to put your book in front of the right people, but that's still not enough for someone like me. For like I said, if you've got the right genre and you got your book hits all the right spots that readers typically like, cool. I'm not like, yeah, I want to write a book about samurais and vampires. Like there's not a huge genre. That's not a genre unto itself. Maybe it will be someday, but not now. So again, I got to be a little different about how I find it. And again, I'm not trying to get rich off one book. I'm trying to add another notch to my belt and just keep my backlist growing. Like you're gonna get on the Red Sunrise Kickstarter. It's not just one book. My entire catalog is available. So you can find Harvest Moon, my detective werewolf story. You can find the books of Jericho, the supernatural thriller series. You can find the Wolfstone Saga, which is this urban fantasy, superhero esque kind of thing. So I mean, like I write a lot of different stuff. Just every time you put out a Kickstarter, you have this. Hey, I got this new shiny thing, but there's also all this other cool stuff underneath it too that you like, and that's where you really make your money. It's not people just buying this book. It's people that say, oh, I like this guy, what else does he have? So that's the key, is just trying to keep a lot of what else does he have ready to go.
And with how often you're doing Kickstarters and crowdfunding campaigns, I imagine you are finding that, somebody might say, "Oh, Samurais and Vampires, it's right up my alley. That's so awesome." Having never heard of you before, and then they say, "Holy crap, this guy's got 10 other books. Like, this is great."
I can't tell you how many times that I've found a new reader, excuse me, who I've never heard of before, who just finds the Kickstarter through either the Kickstarter algorithm or people recommending. That'll just go, oh, this looks cool, I'll buy it all. And it's great for me because I'm making hundreds of dollars, off of
Yeah.
one reader, and that doesn't typically happen on Amazon, right? The Kickstarter fan traditionally likes to spend will traditionally spend a little bit more money, whereas the Amazon reader is looking for deals. The Kickstarter client, customer, whatever you want to say, is typically looking for something different. Like they want to be challenged, they want to find something new. So again, it's just serving the right kind of customer, and that's why Kickstarter works pretty good for someone like me.
That makes sense, and it's funny that you say the Kindle deals, because I know there's a couple times where there's been a promotion. I'm like, I don't know what this book is, but it's $2.99. I'll give it a shot. But out of that
Guilty.
$2.99, what does the author get? Like a buck 30? Like maybe?
On Amazon's not bad actually. Amazon, you're making 70% of a
Oh,
royalty
okay.
rate, so
So
it's
that is
pretty
pretty
good.
good, but
It's
still,
pretty good.
70% of $3 is not feeding your kid.
No, that's why it's volume, man. Amazon's all about volume. That's why there's a whole like a book group called 20 books to 50K, because the idea behind it is when you put out 20 books, you'll make about $50,000, right? Upon average, right? And that's the goal. Some are lower, some are way higher, but that's kind of the idea. And it's publish early, publish often. And same can work with Amazon or with Kickstarter too. Kickstarter, I'm actually making a 90% royalty, which is great. So it's all about finding out how you can kind of maximize your time. And believe me, my stuff's still for sale on Amazon. If you like my stuff, go buy it on Amazon.
Right, of
But
course.
for right now, we're just kind of focusing on Kickstarter, which is my preferred platform, to be honest.
That makes a lot of sense for an indie creator. Kickstarter seems like the place to be.
It's becoming that for comics. It's been the backbone of independent comics for over a decade now, right? It's been the place to be. Independent film too. It's big there. Independent fiction is not. It's not there yet, but it's starting. When I kickstarted Harvest Moon in 2020, I got a lot of flack for it, and I was nobody. I'm nobody in the space, but I had a lot of people. I would talk about it in like these writer groups on Facebook groups, and I had people like snapping at me like, "That's not real work. You're just begging people for money." And I'm not asking people to finish my book for me. Like this is done. Like I got
Mhm.
the book's finished. Like this is the sales platform, but people really didn't get it. And then Brandon Sanderson came along, and he put out his 4 brand new books. Nobody knows what their title gives. It's a genius marketing campaign. He put out his campaign, I think it was earlier this year, and he brought millions of new readers into Kickstarter, which is great because now Kickstarter will serve them to people like me. It's like, hey, you like this? Maybe you'll like this. And now all of a sudden, it's far more acceptable for independent writers to put books on Kickstarter. 2 years ago, it was still kind of persona non grata. Now it's far more acceptable, but we're still, fiction is still one of the smallest categories on Kickstarter. And I think that there's people like a Russell Nolte, like a Monica Leonel, who are out there really, banging the drum, trying to get more writers to pursue this. Dean Wesley Smith's a guy, another guy. They're pushing, hey, get your books on Kickstarter, get your books on Kickstarter, and we're growing, but we're not near what comics is, and nor is it as accepted as comics is yet. But over the last couple of years, I've seen far more positive traction in that direction, and I'm hoping 5 years from now it overtakes Amazon as the platform for independent fiction.
Yeah, it's possible, or at least maybe it'll force Amazon to something of like a mini arms race where, hey, we're losing some market share to Kickstarter. Let's start promoting more indies on our Kindle platform, or give
It,
them a little better royalty.
it's possible. Anything is possible. Like it's all about serving your particular customer base. Like I said, the Kickstarter customer is very different than the Amazon customer. It's all about trying to find what your career is. Like what do you want to be as a writer and how do you make that work? And it can work. You just have to be a little creative and a little different, a little outside the box. Like I said, I would love to be Stephen King, write a book, and just let my team take care of it, and I just sit back and write the next one. I'm not that lucky, so nor am I that talented, quite frankly. So I have to be different. I have to figure out how to find new people, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like I said, I love coming on here and talking about stuff. I love the Kickstarter platform. I love talking about the Kickstarter platform. So if I can evangelize for them a little bit and try to find more people who would want to try this route, I'm all for it.
I would imagine that Stephen King, James Patterson kind of deal where it's like they put their name on a book and it sells billion copies and they have this whole team behind. I imagine that's kind of a dying breed.
It is, and those are guys that they're legacy publishers, right? And they're the best at what they do. And it's not going to be that way because like the traditional publishing modus operandi, it hasn't shifted much since the late 90s, early 2000s. And the independent route is kind of the way things are going. There's a lot of hybrid authors now, a lot of guys who do both, who will focus their own stuff on Kickstarter or on indie platforms, and they'll still do some traditional stuff on the side. I met an author named JD Barker last year who he's Amazon, I'm a USA Today bestselling author, hybrid author, and he said if I'm starting my career, I'm going 100% indie, and if unless you have an advance that's life changing money, I wouldn't take it. I would take control of yourself. So I mean, this has kind of become the acceptable way that successful writers are telling people to get their start now. And because I said, if you're good and someone wants to work with you, they're going to come along and work with you. If that doesn't happen and you're writing your own stuff and you're making money and you're happy, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, for sure. I think Andy Weir's the same deal. They made The
Hmm.
Martian off of his book, and that was a direct to Kindle book, if I remember
Yep,
right.
it was.
Yeah,
It was.
that's
He's super. He's one of the. He is one of the guys that really became super successful doing things his own way. He had a movie. He is a unicorn, as we say. He's done phenomenally. And now there's people like I said, Brandon Sanderson, who do come from that traditional mode, who are like, you know what, this is what I want to do now. And you're going to see more people doing that over the next 10 years. You're going to see a lot more name authors who figured out, man, I can just make more money if I can just do it this way and bring my fans over to Kickstarter or whatever. Like this is the future. Like it's not something that's way off in the distance. Like this is more, actually I take that back. It's not even the future. It's the present. This is where publishing is now, and like everyone else has to kind of play catch up.
to talking about the Kickstarter platform, because every time I talk to an independent, really creative, I mean, movies maybe aside, because sometimes by the time I'm interviewing an indie movie creator, the movie's done and they're putting it out there.
Mhm.
But it always comes back to Kickstarter, maybe Indiegogo also. How long did it take you to kind of figure out that world? Because it's really like its own thing.
Like close to a decade. Like I released my first comic Kickstarter back in 2011, and we successfully funded, but I had no idea what I was doing. Book wasn't finished. I was thinking about crowdfunding the way people yell at people. I think of like crowdfunding is used to, hey, help me bring my thing to life. And I think that was what people thought crowdfunding was back in the day. And it took years to get this first comic book finished. And I kind of thought, well, maybe crowdfunding's not for me. And then I wanted to get back, and then yeah, I wanted to get back into it. And Tyler James's comics launch platform was like mind bending for me. Like I took his class and I really learned what crowdfunding means and what could be done with crowdfunding. It really challenged my own perceptions of what a Kickstarter and Indiegogo is. Like all it is a different sales platform. There's some people that get GoFundMe confused with Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and they're completely different. Like Kickstarter is just like it's a pre-order platform. It's like, hey, I got this book done, or I got this movie done, or I got this comic book. Pay me for it now, and you'll get it. And the more successful creators, the project is done. Like when this book, like my book's done. Like it's a 17-day campaign. When it ends, when the Kickstarter collects the money, the day the money hits my bank account, everything gets sent. Because
Right.
I don't want to sit on it. That's not good business for me. Like, and people bought their stuff, they want it. Like they're entrusting you with a with a platform or with the with this, Kickstarter saying we trust this person, and the backers like, hey, I trust this person. So it's on you to deliver the goods as soon as humanly possible. So that's what it comes down to. It's a level of trust, man. And then it takes time to figure it out. Like I learned a lot about this platform from Tyler James and Comics Launch, and then I just took another course from Russell Nolte and Monica Lionel. Theirs is more book specific, and it ratified some things I already knew. But I learned a ton from those guys. Like I'm learning from people who are further along in their career and more successful than I am. So it takes time. I'm still figuring it. I'm still learning. So that's what's awesome is the platform is still growing. It's still changing. It's still evolving. So I mean, I can't say enough good things. If a writer, an artist, or creator wants to bring a project to life, this is the platform to bring it to because they'll support you. Like, if you get that Projects We Love tag, man, Kickstarter is going to send a ton of traffic to your site. And that's critical. And that's how you do it. That's how you grow your business. You get those new people to put their eyes on it.
Yeah, do you find that it's kind of, because I know, say, if you're promoting something on Twitter, you don't just put out your tweet, have your friends retweet, and all of a sudden it's a big thing. Like there is that overused word now. There's an algorithm behind
Mhm.
it, and there's a formula to how to get something to spread better. I imagine Kickstarter would have to be maybe not the exact same parameters, but kind of the same idea.
There is that, and I learned that on my last campaign. Is we started with Ben Wolfstone's. Like I released a trilogy of novels last spring. My first day was the best first day I ever had. It was like, wow, this is really great. Funded in a few hours. This is really critical. Like, and then we slowed down, and I had that first week when I like it was like, oh man, this is actually falling behind a little bit. Then all of a sudden, Kickstarter started sending it out more. Like they started backing more. I got that Projects We Love tag, and then they used their algorithm. They shared the project with the backers that they thought would be the most supportive of it. And I blew the doors off all my campaign. The second week, I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking like something's wrong. Like I don't know what's going on here. It just I couldn't fathom how this was working as well as it did. So I wound up like I funded way higher than any campaign I ever had before. I don't anticipate that happening with this one because it's a 150-page book as opposed to a trilogy of novels. So I'm not my goals are way smaller in this one. But when you get the algorithm behind you, that's the key, and that's getting that project. I said mentioned, we're getting that Projects We Love tag, is you can approach them and say, hey, let's do this. They can say, hey, can I have this tag? And then it's on them to kind of share it because they want to grow the fiction category, right? Kickstarter knows that the category is one of the smaller ones they have. They want to expand it. They want to make it bigger. So they're going to push, as long as you ask them, they're going to push your wares for you, which is huge. Again, I saw that firsthand. And had I not taken this class, I would never have known that I could do that. So it was an immediate impact. Like, and that's in it is playing with the algorithm. It is kind of knowing how to spike it a little bit. And it does work, man. Like I saw it firsthand. I'm hoping to see it again with this one.
That's really cool, and it's also a good tip for people out there who are trying to do their own Kickstarter. Because as I said, I talked to a lot of Kickstarter people through this platform, and that is good to know. And it's
It
also a
is.
really good tip that you mentioned: be ready or just about ready, because no one wants to back a book and then get the book in 3 years.
Yeah, no, that's bad, man. I remember back in the day, guys were especially with comics, they were not doing their projects. Like I have this project, it could be this, and then you're waiting years and years and years for it to. And I back projects like that, and I was a project like that. It took 3 years for me to get my comic out to people, and I never wanted to be that again. So I mean, like I said, all my books are done. They are live on Amazon right now. I'm gonna pull them for the duration of the campaign because I want people to shop exclusively through Kickstarter, but they're all finished, man. I mean, you're going to be able, if you want Red Sunrise, book is done. The book is edited, like the book is printed, looks awesome, reads, it's really fun to read. You're going to be able to get that immediately. Like the second it closes and Kickstarter funnels the money back to me, and I'm going to go through, I'm going to order them, and I'm going to make sure they're delivered to your house. So, there's going to be no waiting, like no waiting, like reasonably, like it'll probably take a couple weeks. But I mean, like
Right.
realistically,
You're not
it's not
waiting for
like
you to finish the
no,
book and then
no,
have it edited and then rewrites and
nope, it's done. My work, I did the work ahead of time. I paid for my editors, I paid for my artists, I paid for everyone, because this is a business, right? So I spent money. Now I'm looking to recoup what I spent, make a little bit of money. So it's all good, man. We're ahead of the curve on this, and the if that's a red flag actually. If you see someone that you don't know and they're telling you, hey, I'm going to have this book done in X amount of time, I'd second guess something. If you trust them, that's one thing. But if there's someone you've just discovered off the internet, maybe pause and think about it. Like I said, with this one, it's done. You're going to get it within a month.
Right, because another creator might even say that with the best intentions, but you don't know what happens.
100%.
Life gets in the way or something.
Like I said, I'm perfect example of that. I've been there. Like I thought we would have this book done, like Delusion. We did that in 2011. I thought it'd be done in a couple months, and life got, not my life, but it was other people's lives kept getting in the way of me getting my book done. And I remember I got an email once from a guy who's doing a paper on um, Kickstarter projects that never got fulfilled, and that broke my heart. And I was like, man, I never got back to the guy, but I talked to my artist like, we have to finish this, we have to finish this, and he did, and we got it out, and it worked. But I mean, for a while there, I was nervous, and I never want to put myself in that position again. I never want to put a backer in that position again. Like I said, everything is finished on my end. All we have to do is just hit launch, and you're gonna get your book.
That's awesome. I know we're kind of already at time, but if you have a couple more minutes, one thing
Absolutely,
I
I'm not.
always like to ask, and I kind of skipped over it before, what is your writing process like? I always find that fascinating.
For me, I like to. I'll get an idea in my head for a long time, usually before I'll commit to it, and I'll find that if I start thinking about it a lot more, then it's time to write it. So what I'll start with is I'll start with, okay, I have a high concept, and I kind of put the high concept away because I am a character writer. I figure out who the characters are, like who's my protagonist, who's my antagonist, what's he fighting for. Like I'll try to fill, because I try to fight to kind of stay in that 3 act story process. So that's step one for me. And then once I have that kind of thing figured out, I'll start with the acts, because I have the three. I have a chart on my computer, 3 act process. Okay, but this happens here, this happens, this happens, this happens. So I'll get my bones, and then I'll sit and I'll write my outline. And my outlines, I call them tight, but they're not really tight. It's like I'll have like a sentence for the chapter of where I think the story is going, and then after, when I feel comfortable with that, I'll go. And my outlines almost always change, because like the stories and the characters, you have them in here, but when you start putting them on a page, they start to take on a life. It sounds corny, but it's true. They sort of take on a life of their own, and then things will vary. So it always happens where I'll stop in the middle of the book and I'll have to redo my outline because things have kind of moved a little bit, and that's fine. That means your story is actually growing. That's part of drafting the process. And 9 times out of 10, I know where the story is going to end. So it's like I'm driving, right? I know where I'm going. I have a map, but if I need to get off the highway a little bit and go check something out, I can, as long as I know how to get right back on the highway. And even if I get lost, I still got my map. I still know where I'm going. And then from that point on, I'm writing the book. Um, I'm tend to write about, my chapters tend to be about 1,000 words. They knock out fairly quick. So I'll do that about 40 minutes. Like I'll do writing sprints. I'll put the timer on, turn the internet off, and I'll write for 40 minutes uninterrupted. And then I'll try to do it about 3 times a day. So I try to write when I'm writing a book, try to write about 3,000 words a day. Some days I do more, some days I do less, but I try to average around 3,000. And when I get and then I don't go back. I just write when I get the first draft, and then when the first draft is done, then I'll go back and try to figure out what worked and what didn't. It's easier for me when I have something finished, if I can kind of go back and go, this works, this doesn't work. I got to change this. I know I need this, so I'll do all the connective tissue stuff on the second draft, and then at that point, I'll clean it up grammatically, and I'll send it off to my editor, and then he'll do whatever. He's like, "Yeah, it works," or "This doesn't work as well as you think it does. I'm not feeling this, or I'm not feeling that," or then I'll get my notes back, and then it's on me to fix it. So I usually wind up with like 3 to 4 drafts before it gets out there.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. And I think one thing from talking to you, talking to people like kind of in your position, even people who write for comics or movies or whatever, is just consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a job. Like the only way to get better at something, right, is to keep doing it. Like I'm a firm believer of like the 10,000 hours theory. Like you want to become an expert at any subject, you need to put 10,000 legit hours in there. Mark Dawson says you need about 1,000,000 words. I'm probably knocking on the door of 1,000,000 right now. Maybe I might be a few 100,000 behind, but I'm not. I'm getting there. I'm by no means an expert, but I know me. Like I know I think I have a voice now, and it's taken me a while to find my voice, right, as a creator. Because again, you don't know. Like when you first start, you jump into it, and you're gonna figure it out as you go along. And you have to be willing to fail a little bit. Like maybe your first book isn't the best book you've ever written. It shouldn't be, quite frankly,
Right.
right?
It's almost guaranteed that it won't be.
Yeah, and it won't be. So that's fine. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Just go out there and do something. And if nobody, that's the best part is, it's like it's not like you're gonna be ridiculed. You'll release a book into the ether, and no one will care. And that's that's the majority of us. Is you put out something and nobody cares, which is fine. It's free. There's a freedom in that, and there's a freedom to get better, and the freedom to make mistakes, and the freedom to improve. right? You don't have to be Stephen King your first time out. You don't have to be perfect. Just keep getting better, right? Because eventually you'll write something that connects to people. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
and
right away.
even Stephen King, it's not like he sat down at his typewriter, wrote
No,
Carrie or whatever his first big breakout was, and everyone's like, "Oh, this guy's the guy." He probably had 100 books before that ended up in the trash.
that was the first one. Literally, Carrie actually wound up. The story is Carrie wound up in the trash as he threw it out, and his wife, pulled it out of the trash and said, "We can fix this and make it better." So I mean, like, and he had tons of short stories. He comes from a different era where like that's kind of where he started, but he had tons of books that came out that he did before that one hit. So I mean, that's fine, right? You're just gonna find your voice and just keep working at it. Like if it's important to you, you will find the time to make it happen. And I tell people like, well, how do you have time to write? I'm like, because it's important to me.
Yeah,
This is what
everyone has time.
right. Everyone has time in your day if it matters enough, and even if it's 1,000 words, right? And some people say, "Oh my God, how do you write 1,000 words in a day?" And like, I worked at it, right? I try to write 3,000 words in a day. Like, if you don't have the time to do it, it's not important. I know a guy who wrote a book on his phone on the way to work every day. Like when he was on the train, he just wrote, and his time in the train there, his time in the train back was his writing time, and that book became an Amazon bestseller. So if it is important to you, there is nothing stopping you. You will utilize the tools at your disposal. You will figure out a way to get it done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hate that there's no time excuse because it's like every single person has the same 24 hours.
I have a full-time job. I'm a dad. I'm a high school wrestling coach at a pretty good team. Like I'm busy dude, and I make the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, JD, you want to tell everybody? I mean, I'll put the Kickstarter link in the show notes, of course, so that people can just click on it, make it easy. But is there anything else you want to plug, like your socials? Do you have like an author site or anything?
Best place to find me is on Twitter at JD_Oliva, Oliva. The Kickstarter for Red Sunrise is live right now. It's the best place to get any of my stuff. We will be giving away stuff too. Like we're going to be giving away just a ton of free books just for that first week Kickstarter backers, right? You're going to be able to get 40, 50 free books just for backing this one. So I'm all about taking care of people and hooking them up with deals and helping get friends of mine that are writers, into the hands of different people too. That's the best place to find me right now is either on Twitter because that's my preferred form of social media, or on the campaign. I do have Facebook, JD Oliva writer, and Facebook. I have Instagram. It's mostly pictures of my dog and my kid, so you don't really want to follow me on there. There's nothing cool there. My buddy 8-Bit Ray has talked me into getting a TikTok, but I feel like an old man when I look at it. I'm like, I cannot make heads or tails of this platform. It scares me. I look at pictures of dogs and I'm happy with it. So Twitter and Kickstarter is the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. I always find talking to you very inspiring. Someone who's doing it and understands it's a job, but it doesn't matter because you're still enjoying it and you just do your thing. I think it's really cool.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. I love talking with you too.
All right. Well, good luck on the campaign. Hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thanks, buddy.
I'd like to thank JD one more time for taking time out of his very busy schedule and putting his writing aside for a minute to talk to us about his writing career, his writing process, everything he's got going on, and of course, Red Sunrise, which, as I mentioned, is kickstarting right now, so check out the link. You can also get all of his other works there, so it's a great bang for the buck as far as being able to just read. He's got a lot of books out, and he's still moving forward, which is super cool. I mean, anyone who's ever attempted to write one book, let alone finished it, got it out in the world, knows how difficult it can be. So this is a great accomplishment. We wish him the best of luck, and we're looking forward to the next time we get to talk to JD about whatever he comes up with next. If he's already doing Samurai Ronin Vampires, I'm excited to hear what's happening next. Please make sure to like and subscribe. We got a lot more interviews, new movie coverage, comic reviews, con coverage. We're going to a con this weekend. If you're in the New England area, we're going to be at Terrific Con this coming Saturday. So much of that and more, so like, subscribe, bell, whatever's going on right now. I feel like this stuff changes by the day. You're not going to want to miss out. Speaking of not want to miss out, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All of our accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, my friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series. It's called Social Studies. We kind of take a comic look at the high school experience. We follow a group of friends through it as they're trying to figure out pretty much everything. And we style it after the 90s cartoons that we grew up on and inspired us, like Nicktoons, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Recess. I mean, even some Courage the Cowardly Dog sneaks its way in there. big cartoon fans, so we wanted to bring that into the comic book world. We have 9 issues currently available, 10 and 11 coming any day now. You can find them all at socialstudiescomic.com or on Comixology. Thanks.